Hello, my name is Jason Taylor from Regis University. This is the first of three virtual poster presentations adapted from a planned workshop entitled Ignatian Spiritual Practice as a Resource for Accompaniment and Justice Education. For our original workshop, we planned on offering sketches from our own different classroom practices as vantage points from which you might reflect on the three guiding questions on your screen. You might take a moment to pause this presentation and give pre-reflective responses to these questions in whatever way makes most sense to you. The focus of my presentation is on the role that reading plays in the spiritual exercises and on the ways that I try to translate that role into my classroom practices as a philosophy teacher. What is it that the spiritual exercises exercise in us? As an intellectual historian and as a 19th annotation style exercent, I would modestly say that amongst other things, they exercise our capacity to look at the world through the eyes of the one looking at us with love and to understand the heart behind those eyes better. My gratitude to both James Allison and James Baldwin for help with this formulation. Again, I'm interested in the ways that this kind of exercise can be translated as reading together in the classroom. What follows is a brief description of a semester-long reading practice which attempts to do this translating, as illustrated with a typical exercise that I do on the second day of my introductory philosophy class. The example text that I'm using is drawn from the first book that I read in that class, The Moral Underground, by Boston College sociologist Lisa Dodson. The book is about how professionals who work with the working poor make sense of their vocations. It's a work of sociology, but I read it from the perspective of moral psychology. I'm particularly interested when professionals in the book do not know how to live out life commitments which they cannot forsake. At these moments, they will often say things like, I don't know how to be a teacher for my students anymore. I'm also interested when professionals find a way forward in life which involves breaking rules. At these moments, they will often say, I had to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Whose eyes are looking back at them when they look at themselves in the mirror? The first step in my general reading practice is to make a composition of place, to invite students while I read the passage to imagine as vividly as possible that they are in the scene. I invite you to do the same. On page 2 of the introduction, Dodson writes, more recently, I was listening to Alice, a senior manager in a large nursing home in Western Massachusetts. She spent most of her time talking about the importance of quality care for the elderly, explaining how nurses' aides do all the hands-on work. Yet she said that the aides were paid so little that the problem is that they can't take care of their families. Looking out the window together, we watched Irina, a nurse's aide. She was walking very slowly, helping an elderly man make his shaky way to a chair on a sunny porch. Through the window, we could hear her quietly encouraging his timid steps. Watching this typical nursing home moment unfold, Alice said, sometimes I think that it's just plain wrong. Like to do it to obey company rules makes me a bad person. And she went on to describe how she sidesteps the regulations and fudges paperwork about schedules and hours worked to help out workers like Irina. I will ask students to share out what they noticed in their imagination from this reading exercise. This sharing out itself is often a quite powerful and striking experience. Step 2 of this practice involves me inviting students to look at the passage through my eyes, to offer an emerging sense of how I look at not only the text, but also the world and at them. In this text, I'm interested in noting the emergence of the transcendent in an ordinary nursing home moment, or more prosaically, how much drama there actually is in this short passage. So I will draw their attention to Irina's accompaniment of the elderly man. Alice is looking through the window. Through whose eyes does she look at this scene and at herself? I'll point out Lisa Dodson's accompaniment of Alice in what St. Ignatius would call a spiritual conversation. And finally, I point out our own looking through the window of the text. So how would I answer or respond to the guiding questions of our workshop? How do I structure classroom space to allow for the flourishing of my students as whole persons? For me, the phrase contemplatives in action as an anthropological statement about a human possibility implies that our wholeness as persons consists partly in the linkage between consciousness and conscience, the linkage between our real attentiveness to the real and ethical dispositions like courage or justice. Flourishing can come from strengthening that linkage. How do you help students to connect what they're learning in the classroom with discernment about the persons they wish to become? I try to help them see that the drama which Alice and Lisa Dodson witness is not only on the other side of the window, but also in the room with them. so too our classroom material is both over there and right here with us. And finally, how do you see yourself as a teacher, accompanying young people in the co-creation of a hope-filled future? I see myself as not only walking with students, but also looking with them. That entails looking at myself through my students' eyes, but it also entails my students coming to see themselves from the perspective of someone like myself who deeply respects them and genuinely likes them. I hope this has been helpful in reflecting on your own practice, and I welcome the opportunity to talk with you further.